Valedictory session of the 36th All India Criminology Conference of the Indian Society of Criminology. We'll begin the program with a floral welcome to the distinguished guest on the dais. 14th February 2013 was a international campaign of 1 billion rising. All over the world, women, men and all the other communities have joined with a struggle that stop violence against women. 14th February, we have hosted that in Dwaraka, inviting all the educational institutions, schools, NGOs and women's groups. And 2 to 6, we joined in this international campaign, Stop Violence Against Women. That was a real curtain raiser for this 36th All India Criminology Conference. Now we will begin the program with the welcome address by our Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Ranveer Singh. Yes.
I'm extremely privileged and proud to be standing before you this evening to extend a very warm welcome to Honorable Mr. Justice J.S. Verma, former Chief Justice of India, and also the Chairman of the NHRC, National Human Rights Commission. And for me, what is more important is he's also a chair professor on professional ethics with National Law University, Delhi. So welcome you, sir. More importantly for me, giving that wonderful report, and I am sure everybody has got a copy of that. If anybody is left, please do not forget to collect your copy from Professor Rao or from me. The idea is, the NLU Delhi has taken an initiative that when you go back home, you deliberate, you discuss, you dialogue, and disseminate what is in the report, so that the hard work done by Justice Verma and the committee is not lost. So this dialogue must continue because we have to find solutions to many of the problems and crimes. We have Honorable Ms. Justice Geeta Mittal Das, Judge of Delhi High Court, and a very important member of the National Law University Delhi family. She is also on the General Council, and the best part about her is for any function we invite her, she is always with us. She has to attend some very important marriage today in the evening of a very close family friend, and she is still with us. And she will leave us after the address. But wonderful madam, thank you very much for being with us. Professor N.R. Madhav Menon, the founder director of National School Bangalore, and I had the privilege to work with him in the year 96-97. Whatever ABC of the law school, administration, teaching, training I learned at the feet of Professor Menon. I owe a great deal to Professor Menon, whatever I have become in my life. I welcome you, sir, on behalf of all the family. We have Dr. A. Sivamurthy, Chairman, Indian Society of Criminology. Thank you very much for your trust in us. We were really worried. We are not a very big university. We do not have many facilities. When Vajpayee told me that so many students are coming, I had sleepless nights. I said I can manage the faculty, but I don't have place for the students. But I found if you have place in your hearts, you always have enough space everywhere. And the whole team has done a wonderful job. Professor Rao, my entire faculty, the team of students, and Vajpayee, give them a big hand. Faults, if any, are mine. The credit should go to the entire team, those who have managed this conference. Professor Tilak Raj, Vice Chairman, Indian Society of Criminology, again, thank you very much for your trust in us. And I hope we have kept a part of the trust which you repose in us. Professor B.B. Pandey, if I tell you that anecdote, which I often share with the friends, that once a child fell into a pond, and then people said the child is going to drown, and then somebody found that a person jumped into the pond and saved the child. Everybody said, "You have done a wonderful job, very well done, otherwise the child would have died." He said, "Everything is all right, but please tell me who pushed me to the pond." The person who pushed me to this pond was Professor Pandey. and I'm happy that it is because of his good wishes. He said, "Don't worry, I'm with you. I'm going to be there in all sessions, all the days. Any problem, I'll take care." And he has been a fatherly figure, a philosopher, a friend, a guide, and it is because of him that we could take the risk of organizing such a big conference. Thank you very much, sir, and I welcome you for this. We have also the director of the National Institute of Tuberculosis and Forensic Science. I have fellow vice chancellors. In fact, I would like to name each and everybody, but then welcome address would be too long. We had Professor Vivian Lord, Fulbright Scholar at the University of Madras, and the Director of the Mediation Sector Program from the UNC Charlotte University, USA, and Ellen Cohen. We have Anil Kapoor, barrister from Canada, and Professor Osgood Law School, he is with us. We have Mahesh Nala, School of Criminal Justice, Michigan State University. This is what makes it a conference today, international conference. And we also have Professor Sri Krishna Deva Rao, Professor of Law and Registrar, who has been working day and night, and I can share a secret with you. I really do not know, or he will be scared of me, because I'm an early riser. Sometime I will call him at 5 o'clock. I ask him, "Are you ready with everything? How many students have come? How many faculty have come? Are the rooms all right? Have you made arrangement for this?" He will know some answers. Some answers he will not know. He will say, yes, sir, everything is fine." So, but ultimately, Rao, everything is fine. Professor G.S. Vajpayee, you have done a wonderful job. You have done a wonderful job. We have the academics from NLU Delhi. We have friends from Bombay. I can see Rajshri come. Finally, she could make it. We have delegates. We have fellow other students, and especially students. You have been really very, very good. We had more than 100 students come from all over India, and we are a university. We have some sort of curfew rules on the campus. We are very fussy about discipline. So I was telling Vajpayee and Rao every time, take care, nobody smokes, nobody drinks, this doesn't happen, that doesn't happen. And fortunately for me, I have no complaints. Thank you very much for your discipline, because we seriously believe that you learn discipline, you learn professional ethics being by the side of the teachers in the classroom. If you learn it here, you are going to be a good human being everywhere. I also extend a very warm welcome to all the chairs, co-chairs, speakers, dignitaries, participants, paper presenters, faculty members, those who are looking after non-teaching staff, student volunteers have done a good job, great job. Give them a big hand. And I also like to share that Honorable Justice Verma sir, we had a special session on your report for 2 hours on 16th from 5:30 to 7:30, and the deliberations, they were all senior professors present probably, and it was difficult to wind up the discussion of the report. They were so happy with discussing the report, and we'll send you the feedback of the academics. And we could include, I would not take much time in this because you are going to present I'll stop by sharing one thing with you. I was a member of the Solis Rabji Committee. My concern and my pain is that we were working on this committee for almost 2 years. I used to come every week from Hyderabad, and we drafted the Model Police Act. The guidance, under the guidance of the guidelines of the Supreme Court when the PIL was filed, and a lot of good things were said in the Model Police Act. And we said about functional autonomy, we said about the state police code, we said about the merits-based selection, we said about the security of this tenure for the policemen, we talked about the establishment committee, and we said encourage professionalism in the dedicated staff of the crime investigation, separated these two wings. Lot of good things were said. And the same thing happened to us, as happened to judicial reforms. I was in one of the sessions with Justice Bhandari on judicial reforms, and I was going through the reform history. I found that we started talking about reforms in 1924. And after that, we have been talking about judicial reforms almost every year in various committees of the Chief Justices or the judges or the Law Commission of India. How many reports are there? But I think probably now time has come when we have a task force to look into the reports and call out what are the important directions and which are the important things which can be implemented to clean the system and also to improve the system. I don't want to take much time because everybody is in a hurry, and especially Justice Verma has been, after the submission of the report, has been traveling so extensively. He was really looking tired, and he has to come all the way from Noida. Thank you very much, all of you being here. I welcome you all once again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Now I would invite Honorable Justice Geeta Mittal ji to give the address. Justice Geeta Mittal, Judge, Delhi High Court.
Honorable Justice J.S. Verma, Professor Madhav Menon, Dr. Ranbir Singh, Professor B.B. Pandey, Professor Rao, Professor G.S. Vajpayee, honorable dignitaries in the audience, and my dear young friends. I always try to write an address because it ensures that you stay within the allotted time limit, especially on a subject like criminology, on which there is so much to be said, especially in the light of the current developments. I found it truly heartening to see the engagement of this gathering of experts in criminology and academicians, especially young learners in this National Law University, with a subject which is the very foundation of the criminal justice system. The importance of the issues which you have discussed is highlighted by the current events in our great country. I was just telling Justice Verma that I have just returned from an international consultation of judges from West Africa and South Asian countries, which was held at The Hague. We were looking at issues relating to gender-based violence in domestic jurisdictions, as well as those which are raised before international tribunals. You would be aware of the ICC, the International Criminal Court, as well as the Tribunal on Rwanda and the Tribunal relating to the crimes in Yugoslavia. We had occasion to visit these forums as well. Judges came and we interacted with them. The events of December 16th and thereafter in our country are raised again and again, as well as the response of not only the legislators and the executive, but of the judiciary, and more so especially of the citizens. There was not an international person, an international judge or a legislator or anybody concerned with the law who was not concerned about what was transpiring in India. The Human Rights report gave us a very adverse report with regard to child abuse and child violence. There was another incident with CNN broadcast of some mother making some kind of a grievance, and which also brought us a lot of negative questioning. We were 3 of us from India. Just as the protests in our country, the focus, or rather the target of discussions, actually criticism of what is happening in this country, is largely judicial delays. Now, such criticism is made without really understanding either the reason, therefore, or the causes underlying the malaise. As a judge, especially one amongst those whose conscience is deeply troubled by the amount that needs to be done, despite every effort to do it all, this really saddens me with the easy criticism without engaging at all with the causes. And that is why the focus of your program discussing criminology truly rejuvenates the spirits. I am positive you have dealt sufficiently on the significant role played by competent scientific investigations in criminal justice dispensation. Certain crimes, especially cyber crimes, those involving electronic modes of communications, terrorism at international levels, drug-related crime, cross-border conspiracies cannot be unraveled without the expertise of the scientists. Forensic examinations, including DNA analysis, goes a long way in corroborating victim testimonies. In many a case of circumstantial evidence, it may be the only vital link connecting the accused to the crime. It is therefore high time that we undertook an audit of what we have accomplished and what needs done, not only with the judiciary but with the scientific, with the investigation, with the prosecution, and as well as the judicial system. More than 65 years after independence, we find ourselves still grappling with definitions of several crimes, including those of gender-based violence issues. The current events led to the constitution of the commission headed by Justice Verma. Valuable suggestions and recommendations made in the report are yet to result in legislation. The positive spirit of our people, the sense of hope generated by the reactions of the youth, especially the young men who have started serious conversations on subjects that were traditionally not discussed, they were in fact taboo, shows that there is a new awareness of rights. The fact that gender-based violence is an equality issue and not merely a criminal issue, that it is intended to subjugate the will and spirit of the person targeted, that it tears into the right of dignity and decent living of the person, is being for the first time understood and realized. More important, it is being realized and understood not only by the women themselves, but by men as well. A truly positive development, and young people like those present in this hall are largely responsible for this healthy development. While we focus on legislative and systemic reforms, the results may not be visible unless we simultaneously focus on the patriarchy and the misogyny underlying the crimes. Therefore, developments in criminology must march shoulder to shoulder with social scientists so that the norms of acceptable social behavior as well as the legal impact of intolerable behavior steep into the mind of every young child, every young person. Any study of criminology would be incomplete without taking a close look at the available scientific investigation facilities vis-a-vis international developments. There is a crying need for capacity building in terms of both quality and quantity of the available facilities. Existing facilities have been rendered dysfunctional because of the failure to recruit, not for years alone, but for decades together. Even in a city like Delhi, while looking at the working of the guidelines of the Supreme Court framed as back as in the year 1987 in crimes relating to sexual offences, I found that getting a DNA report was taking anything from 2 years to 4 years. When I called the head of the forensic science laboratory, they said they had only 3 scientists, technologists, and there were vacancies running into 8 to 10 without those being filled up. And there was the possibility of their expediting results of DNA reports. So how can you impact how will this not adversely impact the justice dispensation system, and how can you blame the court which has to wait for the DNA sample, especially if the witness or the victim is not there, not alive after the sexual violence? A deep look requires to be undertaken into the capabilities of our investigators. How can a constable who does not know what is a DNA comparison, how can he understand the importance of the purity of the sample, or that there is something called touch DNA? Perhaps separation of investigation from other policing duties may not suffice. The very eligibility structure may need a relook. You may need people with science backgrounds to be incorporated, co-opted into the police force. The same malaise afflicts the hapless prosecutors. Not only are they hopelessly untrained, but are abysmally under-equipped. And certainly they are not equipped to match the expertise and the facilities which are available to the Defence Council. Police stations, which firstly are reluctant to register complaints, do not have the wherewithal to appropriately store or preserve the sample or the recovered articles, which may include blood-stained weapons or clothes even. I do not propose to examine the judicial process. Certain important concerns are already receiving attention. Fast-track courts were proposed a long time back and are in this city, have been in existence for quite some time. Now they are specially dedicated to cases involving sexual offences. Child witness facilities have been created in the Karkaduma district courts, which have enabled prevention of secondary traumatization of a victim or of a child witness within the courtroom facilities. We in the Delhi High Court are looking at expanding the availability of this facility to every vulnerable victim or witness, which would include not only victims in sexual abuse cases, but also witnesses in dangerous crimes. India has no witness protection program, and therefore there are several cases where the instance of witnesses turning hostile is so large that the large part of the acquittal rate can be contributed only to hostile witnesses. We are also looking at providing a witness assistance program to facilitate the passage of a witness who comes to court and may be totally lost in a court building having 100 courtrooms. The area which remains of paramount concern, however, remains the complete lack of sentencing guidelines. Sentencing is left to the discretion of a judge who brings his or her own experiences to the bench, and more often than not, it is a crime which guides the sentence, not the profile of the criminal. There is very little assistance available to the courts in terms of the the criminal profile with regard to background, education, his conduct, his psychology, etc. So far as the failure of the prosecution or the police or the investigation forces to assist the court is concerned, there are hundreds and hundreds of instances which I could point out to you, but very glaringly it hurts your judicial conscience when you have to acquit a person because the police builds a whole case relating to an incident which has occurred on the first floor of the building, and you find photographs of the second floor of the building. So the entire scene of the crime has been shifted by such careless investigation. Language has been found to be a huge barrier. For instance, in a case involving murder of rape of a young 5-year-old child, we found that the statement of the witness recorded by the police referred to Galat Kaam. The statement recorded under section 164 of the magistrate referred to Buri Harkate, and the recording of the evidence by the court was equally flimsy, and the ingredients of the offence were not brought out. So while we talk of the sensibilities of the witness, and we talk of aggression of the defense, we forget that the prosecutor, the police woman or policeman who's recording the statement, as well as the judge, are products of the same system, have grown up in the same conservative society, and are reluctant to engage with issues involving sexual matters, especially those involving intimate body parts. And therefore, you may see acquittals for this reason, because the ingredients of the offence have not been disclosed. Undoubtedly, a beginning has been made. Much remains to be done. I am positive that together we shall walk into a future in which crime is minimized. But when it happens, we are able to ensure that every criminal is brought to book and is expeditiously punished. I apologize that I have to leave all of you. I have a wedding, not of a close friend, but of a very close family member, which is at 4 o'clock, and it's a daughter's wedding. So I cannot be excused from attending that function. I apologize to the learned dignitaries on the dais for my absence, and I thank you very much for this opportunity of joining with me.
Thank you, madam, for an inspiring address. Now I would request my colleague, Professor G.S. Bajpai, to present briefly 5 minutes report of the conference. Professor Bajpai.
dignitaries on the dais, ladies and gentlemen. The 36th All India Criminology Conference of the Indian Society of Criminology was organized during 15th to 17th of February at the National Law University, Delhi. Friends, my job is very difficult because I understand that large number of presentations, huge number of participants, a vast range of ideas were deliberated upon. I'll try to summarize a few important things, filing the entire canvas of this conference. The inaugural session had the presence of eminent personalities, including Professor Upendra Bakshi, distinguished professor NLU Delhi, Professor B.V. Pandey, President, Indian Society of Criminology, and Professor Tilakraj, Vice Chairman, ISC, Professor A. Shivamurthy, Chairman, ISC, and the session was presided over by Justice Rajendra Sachar, former Chief Justice, Delhi High Court, and the conference had the central theme, Rethinking Criminal Justice in 21st Century, and it has 6 sub-themes ranging from crime and development, access to justice, protection of women, children and elderly, and many more. The dignitaries who presided over the sessions were amongst others were Professor Upendra Bakshi, Honorable Justice S. Muralidhar, Professor B. Vijay Kumar, Professor D.V. Pandey, Professor T.K. Oman, Professor Chokalingam, Professor Babu Matthew, Professor Sachidanandam, Professor N.R. Madhava Menon, Professor Amjad Khan, Professor B.N. Chatraj, and many more, whose all those names are difficult to take here. More than 60 faculty members from all over, including some foreign countries, attended the event, and over more than 150 students presented their papers. And a special session on Justice Verma panel report on amendments to criminal law was also organized. And there were certain key panels in the selected technical sessions, like one on civil society initiative in criminal justice, consisting of Mr. Suresh, General Secretary, PUCL, Ms. Maza Daruwala, CHRI, Professor B.N. Chatraj, NICFS, and there was also a panel which attracted huge attention against the backdrop of post-Delhi gang rape incident, that was the protection of women, children and elderly. Quite natural to the timings, this session attracted more than 40 presentations, especially from the young friends. And the highlight of most of the session was to evolve effective crime prevention techniques to reduce the fear of crime in the society by promoting an orderly society governed by the rule of law. In most presentations, the need to have a sensitive and humane system of justice was emphasized. The central concern in most presentations was to reshape and rethink criminal justice policies, especially to protect vulnerable sections, enabling the access to justice, and the need to have a system attending to the concern of ordinary citizen in consonance with the constitutional value was also stressed. And the last discussion that we had today in the afternoon was a session, a panel on future of criminology consisting of Professor Amjad Khan, Professor Arvind Tiwari, and myself. Several participants from abroad have also made their presence in this particular program. And there was another highlight of this conference was also a session consisting of young friends contesting for ISC Best Research Paper Award, which had the presentation of at least 10 empirical research papers, and the results were announced. And the participation of young friends from all over was the highlight of this program. In fact, the deliberations in various sessions produced a good number of recommendations to reshape and rethink criminal justice policy were formulated. The set of recommendations will be made available to all concerned officials and the government for consideration. And the young researchers showed a lot of inclination to follow up the issues relating to the protection of women in their respective researches. We are trying to collaborate. Other than the paper presentation, this conference has drastically emphasized the need for collaborating, and the need for developing a human criminal justice system attending to the need to protect the vulnerable section. We would be following up the recommendation on the selected issues with the concerned agency, and probably will come out with a actionable agenda on the subjects which are at the moment dominating the national scene. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Bajpai, for sharing a major responsibility in organizing this 36th All India Criminology. Now I would invite Professor B.B. Pandey, President, Indian Society of Criminology, and he is an advisor to our National Academy of Law Teachers, Professor B.B. Pandey.
Justice Verma, Professor Ranbir Singh, Professor Madhav Menon, Professor Shiv Murthy, Professor K.D. Rao, Professor M.Z. Khan and others, Professor Choklingam and others in the hall. When I stand here as the President of Indian Society of Criminology to speak on the valedictory session, I have two functions. One, giving you a brief idea of where it started and how far we have gone. Maybe more than 6 months back, when we were deciding about the main theme and sub-themes, rethinking criminal justice administration in 21st century was the main theme, and 6 sub-themes: crime, development and criminal policies, protection of women, children and elderly, access to justice, sentencing, correction and reintegration, civil society initiatives in criminal justice, and future of criminology. We little realized that these sub-themes would create a kind of clash with each other. When you talk of crime and development and criminal justice policies, I recall the session of Professor Bakshi and Professor Uman, where they spoke of development itself being criminogenic. Professor Uman said development is not itself criminogenic. Development becomes criminogenic because it inherits 4 small D's. That was his style of disparity, of displacement, of distress, and of discrimination. And all of them lead to crime. Then the other issue, which was most hotly, many papers were presented on that, protection of women, children and elderly, which we thought, when we framed this sub-theme, was very innocuous. But the Delhi gang rape opened our eyes that protection of women may come in conflict with protection of children, or protection of some other section may come in conflict with protection of elderly. Therefore, we have got to keep in mind that these sub-themes also collide. The greatest collision was witnessed when we spoke of sentencing, correction and reintegration. The whole prison philosophy, the whole correctional institution philosophy, around which criminology grows, is based on reformative and rehabilitative policy. And today, there seems to be a great tension when we are talking of having fixed sentence of 30 years, no remission possible. Now, that totally negates correction and reintegration. What are you going to reintegrate then? Or life sentence till the end of life. Now, what is left? I think many prison programs should fold up. Therefore, this is a real rethink, or civil society initiatives in criminal justice. Criminal justice is to be run by agencies that are obligated to do it under CRPC or under the Constitution. And civil society is initiatives come from unobligated sections of society. Now, you cannot expect them to perform, but when the criminal justice obligated agencies do not perform their function, somebody should step in, and that is the role of civil society. And in stepping in, the civil society sometimes oversteps also. That was brought to our mind, and that has led to deliberation in the conference. Several papers that Professor Vajpayee spoke of. And in that deliberation, we have come out with, say, 6 recommendations of the conference. And the conference recommendations are being fine-tuned. That the core conference recommendations are: body of criminologists took cognizance of the growing public concern for the harms inflicted by grave bodily crimes, but advised caution in matter of creation of criminality on the basis of harm alone. Therefore, the body recommends that more scientific researches on the mental blameworthiness element and its relationship with the liability principle should be explored. Are we moving in the direction of strict criminal liability for all harmful conducts? That is very dangerous. What we have earned in 800 years, blameworthiness is the core of criminal liability. And if we do away with it, just because there is a harm, that was the objection, and that is the objection to strict criminal liability. And therefore, if you bring that and would like to increase punishment also for grave crimes, that is going to be... Now, one of the recommendations is the body takes note of growing clamor for enhancing severity of punishment for all forms of crimes and express its concern for reform and reintegrative potential of different kinds of punishment. The body therefore recommends that the different stakeholders in the punishment theme, such as judiciary, prisons and correctional administration, should come together to examine the severity enhancement trend without taking the views of stakeholders. It would be dangerous. It would render them redundant. It would make them jobless, which is a very dangerous trend. One more recommendation was body expressed serious concerns for the trend of growing resort to death penalty and the increasing number of executions. The body felt this trend is a serious encroachment on human rights of even the worst criminals and recommends. We recommend only that a commission needs to be constituted for examining all aspects of death penalty afresh. If you cannot abolish death penalty, if you cannot have a moratorium, which 109 countries have done already, let us have a commission to have a threadbare examination. In what kind of harms? Only death. In what kind of harm? It is discretionary. what kind of harm that imprisonment. Therefore, the task is difficult, the recommendations we have made. I think the second, when I stand as the president of the Indian Society of Criminology, is to perform the task of thanking profusely National Law University, Professor Ranbir Singh in particular. I am standing here and speaking on behalf of the Indian Society of Criminology, speaking on behalf of these large number of participants and members of the Indian Society of Criminology, Professor Ranbir Singh, Professor K.D. Rao, his whole team, Professor Vajpayee, Professor Choklingam, and everybody here who, and the number of student volunteers who have made it possible. We saw a dream that we'll have the 36th Indian Society Congress in National Law University, Delhi. We fought for it. For a while it went to Pondicherry, and we made it a point that it comes back. I'm very grateful to those who made it possible for it to come back to NLUD, but I must thank the NLUD people for having made it possible, for having made the dream come true. Today we are concluding the conference, 36th conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Now we will hear the 1 billion rising song.
Good evening to everybody. 1 billion women assaulted is an atrocity, and 1 billion women raising their voices is a revolution. Thursday, the 14th of February 2013, witnessed such a revolution where all over the world people united to raise their voices to resist violence against women. NLU Delhi was a venue for the 1 billion rising program in Dwarka, which saw many spirited people assemble and raise their concerns which wanted safety of women. For this very cause, we had a song dedicated to the safety of women, asking for equality of men and women, and this conference provides the right platform for us to share our concerns with you. So we would now like to play that song so that we all can be a part of the 1 billion rising program.
बराबरी है चाहिए, बराबरी की बात कर, औरतों की मर्द की बराबरी की बात कर, बराबरी की बात कर, ना मुंह छुपा ना सर झुका, बराबरी की बात कर, औरतों की मर्द की बराबरी की बात कर, बराबरी की बात कर, बराबरी है चाहिए, बराबरी की बात कर, औरतों आपके हो फैसले, ना हो किसी के हौसले, जो औरतों से कह सके हमारे हुक्म पे चलो, परंपरा के नाम पर बहुत सहा, जो जुल्म था वो सह चुके, अब एक नया जहां बना। बराबरी है चाहिए, बराबरी की बात कर, औरतों की मर्द की बराबरी की बात कर, बराबरी की बात कर, ना मुंह छुपा ना सर झुका, बराबरी की बात कर, औरतों की मर्द की बराबरी की बात कर, बराबरी की बात कर, बराबरी है चाहिए, बराबरी की बात कर, औरतों की मर्द की बराबरी की बात कर, बराबरी की बात कर, ना मुंह छुपा ना सर झुका, बराबरी की बात कर, औरतों की मर्द की बराबरी की बात कर, बराबरी की बात कर।
I will adopt this song as a university song for National University Delhi.
"50 years of human rights movement, including women's movement and other movements, was not able to push for such a reform, whether the struggle for anti-corruption or the law for this law or ordinance, or maybe we will look for much more refined legislations for preventing violence against women, was possible because of these old new social movements. Let us welcome all of them. I think that will lead to much more vibrant society. So now I would invite Professor N.R. Madhavamenon, Chairman Millet, to give the address.
Honorable Justice Verma, my fellow panelists, distinguished delegates to the 36th Congress of the Indian Society of Criminology. I understand that you had a very fruitful discussion. I missed the first 2 days' deliberations. Only today I could join the morning session on the future of criminology was being discussed in that session. But I understand that it has been a very fruitful sort of turning point for the Indian Society of Criminology to move from mere academic discussions to some action programs or policy development as one of its major goals for the future. Barabari Ki Baat Hai, the song that we heard, Justice Geeta Mittal also has emphasized that the issue is of equality and not merely of violence against women. But I must remind you that in the concept of equality under the Indian Constitution, it provides for reasonable classification, for differential treatment, and certainly for women, perhaps it could be positive discrimination. So therefore it is not barabari, it is perhaps more positive legislation for women in order to make women perhaps equal in all respects too. So barabari, by law students at least should understand, it is not the absolute equality that we take it in ordinary parlance, but a qualified equality which may vary from situation to situation. Be that as it may, my understanding from that point proposition which was raised in the song as well as by Justice Mittal is that the problem with criminal justice in India today is one of law and legal institutions entrusted with the implementation of the law, and the conflict of law and legal institutions with the Indian Constitution. After all, the laws were the laws which are developed by Macaulay and his colleagues in pre-independence period. Whether you look at Indian Penal Code or the Criminal Procedure Code or the Evidence Act, or you look at the court system, the adversarial trial, the sentencing procedures, you find that all the institutions of law, investigation, prosecution, prison, correction, these are all there for more than 1.5 centuries. The major change that happened on 26 November 1950 is the value of a constitution which made a lot of difference in the way laws have to be enacted, laws have to be interpreted, courts have to administer, police have to investigate, prosecutor has to do his duty. You find there is a dysfunctionality between the law and legal procedures and the constitutional ideals, principles, values and goals. Unfortunately, these values and principles of the Constitution could not be adequately reflected in the pre-existing law, institutions and procedures. That's why it took several years after independence for the law of arrest to be reformed by intervention of the Supreme Court. The law of bail, search, seizure, custodial interrogation, everything had to be reformed. So today we have a criminal procedure code informed and illuminated by the values of the Constitution, at least partly, not fully. The law of rape was something different. Before the Mathura rape case came, Professor Bakshi's petition, Supreme Court revising its own views and subsequent intervention of the Parliament, it was constitutionalized over a period of time, the law of rape. But this constitutionalization of the law and procedure has not been sufficiently informed to the police, the prosecutor, the judge, the defense lawyer and others who are involved in implementing this. So I see the problem of criminal justice, broadly speaking, the struggle to adjust the pre-existing law and procedures to the values and principles of the Indian Constitution. That's how I look at that the song said, Barabari ki baat hai. That is the constitutional question. How do you change these laws? An attempt was made by Justice Verma with respect to rape to constitutionalize the law of rape and the procedure of investigating rape cases or trying and punishing them. But we have the whole law of Indian Penal Code to be constitutionalized if you were to do it, if you were to bring it. Be that as it may, this is a very good, interesting occasion for making a turning point, so to say, in the agenda of the Indian Society of Criminology. I exhort Shivamurthy, Pandey and other colleagues to look at it from that perspective. In the forenoon session today, the session was devoted to the future of criminology. And the question was raised, why are we worried about the future of a subject, criminology? Apparently, we are concerned that it is being disregarded by everybody. Even when crimes are increasing, criminologists have no place. Criminology as a subject has no place. We are pleading in every convention of the Indian Society of Criminology, please include it as a subject. Please appoint teachers for it. Why are you pleading for it? If crime is so crucial, security is the issue that is confronting the nation. This is unfortunate, but the occasion is now provided thanks to the women's struggle, thanks to the social upheaval after the Delhi gang rape case. That today society, the leadership, the parliament is prepared to look at these issues concerning the security of the weaker sections of the community, particularly women and children, who constitute 3/4 of the Indian population. That if the laws are inadequate, if the procedure is inadequate, if sufficient institutions are not there, the government seems to be prepared. It is now the turn of the criminologists to offer the solutions. Justice Verma report is not the complete answer. It's only with reference to a particular thing. The whole area of crime, of juvenile justice, if you have the answer, the criminologists, the Indian Society of Criminology, come forward, this is the occasion. Right climate is created. Outcome of the Delhi gang rape. So my submission therefore is that the 36th Congress, the Indian Society of Criminology, the Delhi National University, coming after this great unfortunate episode of the Delhi gang rape and the welcome development of the Verma Commission report, we have the action agenda which Vajpayee talked about, ready-made, provided for us. Can the Indian Society of Criminology follow up the Verma Commission report and provide us appropriate policy directions to reform the law relating to women and children? So many issues are being developed. I do not agree with abolition of death penalty. I have publicly come out with that. It needs to be streamlined, I agree. But how it is to be done? Rarest of rare cases was perhaps supposed to be good at that time. But now we find it did not streamline. So if you have to keep this death penalty, how it can be streamlined so that equality is not violated, it cannot be discriminatory. People are not imprisoned for long periods awaiting the gallows in the name of mercy petition to the president. So many things, intermediate things need to be done to make even an extreme penalty like death acceptable to the human rights jurisprudence. Who will give the answer? It has to come from criminologists, on whom I find lawyers, social workers, criminologists, psychologists, medical men, everybody has something to contribute, because our discipline is a hybrid discipline which requires all the knowledges that are available about behavioral patterns. So I submit that the actionable agenda which Vajpayee talked about in his remarks is provided by the Delhi gang rape and the report of Verma Commission. And that can be adopted, Shivamurthy and Pandey, if you want, for the next 1 year. Some of the students and faculty members, criminologists assembled here, may be interested to look at children, child rape, juvenile justice, whether the age should be reduced or not. Look at it from available scientific literature, from within the country or outside. Examine its pros and cons and propose an actionable, supported by available empirical evidence. That will be a great contribution, a supplement to Verma report. Similarly, victims and reliefs for the victims. What should be the legal requirements for a victim, that is women or girls, to be provided pending the trial, immediately after the crime has happened? It can be medical relief, psychiatric relief, counseling, rehabilitation, you name it. So many things need to be done. Where is there in criminal law? How would you bring it about? So some people who are concerned with victimology might like to take up this particular part, not victimology for the whole world, all victims. Every one of us is a victim. But concern this only with reference to this section, women and children. Can you come out with, from the available literature, some actionable points? Or witness protection. Witnesses are won over. There is another case of a similar nature which has created an equal social upheaval in Kerala. This is a Suryanelli rape case where a girl of 16 years have been raped by 42 men in a period of 40 days. And many of them are very powerful men. One of the alleged rapists is the deputy chairman of the Rajya Sabha. So it was a sensational case, and all the 39 were charge sheeted, all the 39 were convicted by the Sessions Court. And all the 39, excepting one, were acquitted by the High Court. And when it came to the Supreme Court said that this is a perverse judgment. The High Court did not look into available evidence on record. Something gone wrong. And they sent back to the High Court saying it's a shocking case where the High Court has reacted like this in a rape of a girl of 16 by 40 men. So therefore atrocious things are happening, much more atrocious than the Delhi gang rape case, which is making big social upheaval in my state of Kerala. So if you are wanting to look at witness protection, this is a case where witnesses are won over because you allow 3 years, 4 years. Witnesses are attracted by powerful people, the rapists, to give them anything that they want, and you cannot blame the system. Investigation. If you are police officers and you want to refine the investigation in the light of recommendations of the Verma Commission report, why don't you come out with a critical analysis supported by empirical evidence to strengthen and amend the law and give direction so that it can go into our training program for the police? Investigation or forensic science. A case was referred to by why the delay in the forensic science. People do not understand what is DNA testing, why it is needed, why it's so critical. So therefore, those who are interested in forensic science vis-a-vis offense against women and children, sexual offenses, come out with what needs to be done. Or if you want sentencing, somebody interested in that area, apart from death penalty, what about lifelong imprisonment? What about other alternatives? Compulsory labor. What about so many other things which can be human rights friendly, but nonetheless will have. Otherwise we don't have any alternatives in sentencing. Fine or imprisonment, fine or imprisonment. What is this? Will either of these two will suffice for rape? I don't know. If I am rich, I am a rapist and I am prosecuted, I am prepared to pay 1 crore fine. Are you satisfied? So fine is irrelevant. Imprisonment, there are people who are happy with imprisonment. In our country of poverty and illiteracy and prison reforms, thanks to Justice Iyer and others, I would rather live in the prison, and nowadays people are doing business from prison. So imprisonment and fine, the two available alternatives, are not at all relevant to such atrocious criminals who rape 3-year-old child and kill. So therefore, what are you asking for when you are fighting against death penalty? Okay, so sentences and sentencing. Well, one may need to study the rapist, his profile. Who are they? We are told that they are all friends and relatives of the victim. Father, brother, uncle. All happens in the family. The Human Rights Commission, I don't know whether it was Justice Verma's period, has come out with a revelation that 60% of all children are abused while they were children by the family. This did not come from a criminologist, came from the National Human Rights Commission. So if that is the case, can criminologists come out with appropriate action points vis-a-vis women and children on sexual abuse? So what I am trying to drive home is that the 36th Congress is significant for the unfortunate developments with respect to offences against women, particularly rape, including the Delhi gang rape case. And equally significant for the social upheaval and public mobilization for doing something drastic, which the government is compelled now. Parliament is being compelled. This is the right time for action. The visibility of the Indian Society of Criminology will go up if it comes out with something scientific, systematic, which the scholars can contribute to so many aspects of criminal justice vis-a-vis the offences, sexual offences against women and children. I hope the discussions during the last 3 days and your deliberation on the Verma Commission report will help us to do something like that, so that next year when we meet, we will have contributed something to development of policy for these weaker sections of the community. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now I would invite Honorable Justice J.S. Verma, former Chief Justice of India and Chair Professor, Professional Ethics at NMU, to deliver the lecture.
Vice Chancellor Dr. Ranbir Singh, and all the distinguished professors on the dais as well as in the audience, distinguished delegates, and my young friends. Enough has already been spoken about the report. I'm not here to speak more about that. I would only tell you this, that this theme for this year's conference is very timely and contextual. It was a very unfortunate incident in the national capital on the 16th December, which has triggered this response not only of the civil society, but as a result of the manner of protest by the youth who comprise most of the civil society, which has compelled the government to wake up, to perform its duty, which I doubt very much it would have taken these steps but for what happened. When, see, it's for quite some time that civil society has been rising against injustices. For example, for a couple of years we have those road shows protesting corruption. But this is entirely different. Many people have asked me, don't you think this will peter out the same way as the earlier agitations have? Well, I'm very sure this is of a different kind totally. And it is not an emotional reaction, it's a rational way of thinking, at least maybe I'm wrong, but still I don't think it is so. The reason is that here, on this occasion, the people who have been protesting, each one is his own leader. There is no politician leading any one of them, or anyone with political ambition who is trying to lead the protesters. Every one of them. You see, when I was watching the protest shown on the electronic televisions, it was very obvious that most of these young people did not know who was the person standing to their right or to their left. What further impressed me was that the protesters were young men, boys, that is, most of them males, and the manner in which they behaved, well, I told someone, I said this kind of peaceful protest made spontaneously and not reacting even to unreasonable manner of dealing with them by the concerned authorities. I mean, certainly I got the feeling this is the first time Gandhiji, wherever he is, his soul must be resting in peace. This is true. And I personally felt that it was a very, not only a learning experience for us of the earlier generations, but indeed a humbling experience. It is this youth, and that is what made me accept without a second thought when I was approached on the 23rd December late evening by Chidambaram, obviously at the behest of the Prime Minister, to try to perform this task. Now, I thought to myself, I'm trying to share some of those things because details of the report all of you have, I don't want to go into them, and it has been sufficiently discussed. Just to indicate the significance of a movement which has started, and I consider this very important conference as a very significant part of that movement which has to be sustained. And therefore what is necessary to sustain it is to realize what really is that which is impelling each one of us to do his bit. Now, see, I realized that the parliament, ultimately the law has to be made in the parliament. The only thing is, we can bring about that pressure by making recommendations and the pressure continuing, so that ultimately the only thing which the politicians are afraid of and which they can't ignore is public opinion, because that ultimately affects their career. And therefore, see how best to impress on them as early as possible. Because normally what happens is, if you take time to say that thing, by that time half the people forget and rest take it for granted, nothing happens. So as soon as I agreed to Chidambaram's request, I realized after asking him that the parliament, next session of the parliament was to commence 2 months hence, because this was on 23rd December and he told me it is from 21st February. I realized if within half the time we are able to give something to start the process in the parliament, well, other ideas, I mean, fine-tuning and all those things can continue. But then to pressurize these people to do that task, and I said, if we can do it in half the time without any resources, then you see, they with all their might and all the infrastructure, why can't they do something worthwhile to at least initiate the debate in the parliament from the first day? That is the reason why the 30 days, you see, without realizing the implication thereof, when I said that, I said 30 days and went about. That was 23rd night. You see, I'm only indicating to you the response of the civil society, not my role. You see, it was on the 23rd night. Next morning, I called the concerned officer of the Home Ministry, finalized the notification and deliberately altered a few expressions, because I had in my mind this is an opportunity. Whether ultimately the people who have to make the law accept it or not is a different matter. But then let the civil society, the people know that these are all related matters and you can't ignore them. You can't just deal with, you see, the end part without going into the root cause, without going into the entire process which ultimately takes you to the end. And therefore, certain expressions, for example, speedy justice. Now, the speedy justice, I said, I can start with police reforms, because unless the investigation is proper, the prosecution is proper, you see, what can the court do? And then when judicial reforms, because when it comes to the court, when the ball is in your court, then also you have to act swiftly. So judicial reforms, and not only that, as Professor Menon just now pointed out, what is very significant is the current reformative theory, that is sentencing and thereafter. So, rehabilitation homes, so on and so forth. And you see, the meaning or the scope of a sexual offense or sexual assault has also to be understood clearly in the constitutional context. So anyway, that was done. There was no time to invite people, and it was not a matter of any personal egos. You see, just as we volunteered, we thought, next morning I drafted, finalized the notification and said give public notice, so that public notice is invitation to everyone. And let me tell you, not only people from this country, our own country, people from world over, without any invitation, responded, telephoned, sent emails, that's how it was possible. And the maximum credit, and this is what I want to emphasize on you, the report may go by my name, and that's a different matter, but the real contribution is made by the youth themselves. 15, 16 youngsters. The only thing I did was, I then told Chidambaram, tell me the membership, because I will decide. He said, yes, whatever you say. I said, there has to be a lady judge. Well, Leela said, naturally, distinguished lady with a lot of experience, former Chief Justice. And a lawyer of the front rank now, but who's prepared to leave all his work for 30 days and do it. Incidentally, Gopal Subramaniam was my lawyer whom I chose 21 years back when I headed the Rajiv Gandhi Assassination Commission. He was then a promising junior. He has blossomed, the way all of you know, into being one of the front-rank lawyers. And it ended up this way. From that very day, young people, including a professor from this university itself, Professor Mrinal Satish, there was not one person I invited. I only nominated the members, for constitution of the panel. Each one of them came, including two students, one from Cambridge University, the other from Oxford University, who happened to be here. They came, they said, "Sir, can we also work?" We said, "Most certainly." So 15, 16 youngsters. I'm just trying to emphasize and point out, not only tell you to whom the credit really goes, but also the kind of awareness, the kind of awakening in the society has arisen, which must be sustained. And if that remains sustained, of which I have no doubt, then, well, whatever be the vested interests of the politicians, they certainly can't ignore it. And ultimately, in my covering letter to the Prime Minister, and along with the report, in the report I've ended by saying that, you see, ignoring this present mood now would be at the peril of the people in authority themselves. So it is that stage. Now these 15, 16 youngsters, young lawyers, or about half a dozen juniors of Gopal Subramaniam, some other lawyers, law graduates, etc., etc. I didn't know any one of them except one earlier. Round the clock for 30 days, they worked using their own resources. It may be of interest to you to know, not even a sheet of government paper was utilized. Everything was provided by Gopal Subramaniam's chamber and his staff, who worked ungrudgingly for all these days. And you see, these children also who worked, the youngsters, they were using their own resources for travel, everything, and leaving everything here. I'm sure none of them slept for even 5 hours on any of those days. And on the last day, you see, it was past midnight on the 22nd, because on 22nd itself I decided that we'll give it, 24th was the last day, so we'll give it on 23rd, one day earlier. I fixed 2 p.m. for the time when they had to. I said, if the PM wants it, then of course we'll give it. To anyone else, I said, I am not giving, let him come and take it. I'm in our presence. So, 2 o'clock we fixed for the report to be given to whosoever comes. 3 o'clock was the press conference, because we said simultaneously let the people know. Because otherwise it will go and be locked up somewhere and people would not even know what we have said, in spite of the hard work which these youngsters have done. So on the 22nd night, it was past midnight, that I, Leela Seth and Gopal did the final proofreading. But do you know what happened thereafter? After we rose, these youngsters sat for the second round of proofreading till the morning. And that's why I feel confident you will not find many mistakes which normally there would be in a quick proofreading. They finished the proofreading at 7:45 in the morning on 23rd. At 8 o'clock, they took it to the printer themselves, sat with them, got the original and a few other bound copies prepared which were to be given them there. And at 12:30, they brought it, got the original for our signature. And you see, we were there at 1 o'clock and much before 2 o'clock, etc. Now, this kind of dedication is something which makes this exercise entirely different from what we have seen. You see, again, in respect of what has been happening for the last couple of years in combating corruption. Because this is This is not led by anyone with any political ambitions. You see, either latent or patent. There is something, each one of them is a leader by himself. No one had to be persuaded. So, and mind you, these students who had come, they got in touch with their professors in Oxford, Harvard, so on and so forth. The Chief Justice of Canadian Supreme Court, she rang up. We didn't invite anyone else. So this is the kind of response which we had globally. The global research which you find, I am myself surprised when I look at it. How could you gather so much of literature? It was only these children who did it. 2 days back, you see, and the interest it has generated. Geeta Mittal told you just now that she was in Netherlands, etc., and everyone was talking about it. Because the issue is of global concern. Issues of global concern. It's something which everyone is very keen to see that this gross injustice and gross egregious human rights violation should not happen. And that, say, the European Union ambassadors 27-28, they invited me for a luncheon meeting, actually more to discuss this. This is the only thing they wanted to talk about. We talked for 2 hours only 2 days back. So this is what is going to sustain. Our contribution is, of course, so many things are yet to be done, as Professor Pandey pointed out and Professor Menon pointed out. But then a great beginning has been made. The moment the ball has started rolling, the pace has to be kept up. Now that is what is important. Now coming to just a few points. I gave this background to indicate to you only the significance and how timely this conference is. Because rethinking this aspect is a part of rethinking. You see, if half the population comprises of women, females, how can you talk of human development of any kind while ignoring them and without giving them that right to dignity or right to a dignified life, which is guaranteed constitutionally and even otherwise in the international instruments? As Mahbubul Haq said, human development, if not engendered, is fatally endangered. Now, engendering requires all these things to be done. Professor Menon just now told you that equality, when you have to equalize to unequals, then sometimes you need to be proactive. The sportsmen know very well, and I'm sure some of you do, in the game of rackets, there's always a handicap for the person who's weaker, for the purpose of equalizing. That is affirmative action, which is, you see, provided in our own constitution. And that is why the expression gender equality, I'm not inclined to use. I always use the expression gender justice. Because equality is there, justice has a wider connotation. So what is needed is gender justice, and as Professor Menon points out, you need to be proactive. Affirmative action is required. Now someone, you see, who has suffered or is continuing to suffer from that disadvantage. So the basis of our report primarily is shifting the mindset from patriarchy. You see, because it is not, you see, sexual crimes are not merely or entirely sexual in nature. They are assertion of male power. Therefore, the shift is from the concept of patriarchy to the constitutional basis of equality guaranteed in Articles 14 to 16 of the Constitution. You will see that in the preamble, all those things which are guaranteed, they end with assuring the dignity of the individual and of course the unity and integrity. The word used in individual. So, I mean, it is deliberately this choice of the word which makes it gender neutral, so that how can you from individuals separate half the population? So that is the constitutional foundation on which, and then we have said it's not merely the state responsibility. Of course, the state responsibility is the major responsibility. And it is in that context we have said, we quoted from NHRC's order in the context of Gujarat, that you see the emerging principle of human rights jurisprudence is that the state is responsible for the violation of any human right within its territorial jurisdiction, not merely by those committed by the state actors, but also by the non-state actors. Now, when we said that, we gave notice to the, because after all, if the state has done everything, and then also something happens, then you can't say that the state has failed in the performance of its duty. But then the state must explain. Whenever such a violation takes place, a duty is cast, the burden is on the state to show that due diligence was exercised. And therefore, in that case also in Gujarat, what we had done was, on the first April order of 2002 when we had made, which we have quoted in the report as one of the bases, we have said that we gave notice to the state government and also the union government to indicate what did they do to prevent. Because not merely stepping in after a crime is committed to prosecute and punish the offender, what is more important is to make sure to the best of your ability that the crime is prevented, not committed. And that is all, because whatever you may do after the offense has been committed, you can never put back the clock exactly where it was earlier. And therefore, you see, the duty is to prevent. And when their explanation was found to be inadequate or unsatisfactory, then they were held liable. You see, recently some researcher somewhere wrote a letter to me saying that we had missed this aspect. Of course, we may have missed so many things because in 30 days you can't cover the entire gamut, a lot has to be done. But whatever we have stated, I don't think at least we have missed something very obvious. So we missed that part. In this case also what we have said is, we have deliberately not gone into or even mentioned or commented on any fact which is to be tried. The matter is sub judice. So we won't do that. But the undisputed facts, what are the undisputed facts? The undisputed facts are such an incident happened in the heart of the national capital at a certain time which was not too late at night, 9:30. It happened in a bus. And that bus, if the laws which were already in existence, that's why our first conclusion in the report is, if existing laws are faithfully implemented by credible law enforcement agencies, then most of the things would be taken care of. You may, I mean, that's not to say that you don't need to make some amendments or some more laws, that's all right. But you have the most perfect laws. But if the institutions which have to work it are not perfect, so not merely institutional integrity, as Amartya Sen says in his idea of justice, the individual integrity also of persons manning them is important. Now, so far as what kind of buses should be permitted on the road, what kind of drivers can be there, what kind of helpers can be there. There's a 1997 Supreme Court order after the Wazirabad school bus tragedy, which said all that. You see, after hearing the Chief Secretary, the Police Commissioner and the Transport Commissioner for 2 days, with the aid of Harish Salve as the amicus curiae, because I know that I had made that order myself. Now, if even half of those directions which were already there had been followed, well, that would not be there. So this was clearly a case of which could be prevented if what was already there had to be implemented. So we have gone into that preventive part also, because you see, unless you deal with that, simply trying to punish the perpetrator of the crime after the crime is committed is of absolutely, I mean, that certainly can't be as good as that. Then, you see, I mean, there is the state responsibility, of course, those articles and Article 39A, equal justice, etc., those things are there. Now, civil society's role in this case also, you see, apart from this, more than 50 persons are said to have passed that way when those two young people, completely distraught and totally battered up, they were lying there, people stopped. Now in this extreme winter, I think everyone wears enough clothes so that you can always spare one garment in case of need for them. Not one person, including any of the ladies which passed that way, thought it fit to, you see, drape the girl at least with a shawl or something. Now civil society has also a constitutional obligation, and that is in clause E of Article 51A, the fundamental duties, which require every citizen to renounce practices derogatory to women. So, this is also a constitutional basis for the citizen's responsibility. So, we have dealt with this basis of responsibility to prevent, and of course, if a crime is committed, then thereafter to follow it up. That's one aspect we have. So, the basis is really not merely, and that's why 354 speaks of outraging modesty. Now the emphasis is only modesty, it's bodily integrity of every individual, including every woman. You see, gender justice, which includes bodily integrity, and therefore the shift has to be that way. And that it is not that supposing such an incident happens as it happened in this case. Now we have mentioned those in particular. Someone says that after the incident, the victim becomes a zinda lash. Well, what is this? I mean, there's an entirely different concept. Mindset has to change. Someone else says, you should have said, Bhai Sahab, मैं आपकी बहन हूँ. I mean, you see, it's a shocking statements. This is, and therefore, we have mentioned some of these shocking things. And this mindset has to change. And this mindset, if the environment, unless the environment is improved, and that has to be improved, you see, from birth, through education, formal and thereafter. And therefore, you see, at home, through the school, it's a 1922, Gandhiji, there is a book called Valpothi, in which Gandhiji's, some of his sermons are there. And that was long back while dealing with this Fundamental Duties Committee in 1999, I had seen that. Now, there is a lesson when the mother tells the son that your sister has as much right to go out and play as you have. And you have as much duty to help in the household chores as she does. And this is how your mindset, you see, is improved. So what is needed is not merely talk only of the state responsibility, but also of these things. Then we've gone trafficking, we've said is a new work, because unless you control trafficking, you can't control so many of those things. Most of these cases are unreported. Protection homes, juvenile homes, the administration is such that they are dense for, you see, all these crimes. Now, a child who has been trafficked and subjected to sexual abuse in these homes, etc., when he grows up, what else can you expect from him? So you can't rule out the possibility of so many of them, you see, with that background. That's what we have tried to go into those things. I'm just mentioning only a few of the things which we thought. Now, FIRs are not registered, that's a usual thing. The starting point is not there. In the first place, there's diffidence by the victim to report. Then there's pressure from the family, friends, etc. कि भाई भूल जाइए जो हुआ अब क्यों होगा, उसकी वजह है थाने में गए, there is a further humiliation. Then the medical examination, well, Geeta Mittal's judgment we have quoted. Now the manner of medical examination, so it's a woman being raped by someone and thereafter the entire process is a continuing rape. It's nothing short of that. And in the trial court, when she is examined, the kind of obnoxious cross-examination, and even examination in chief is not very sensitive. And now, you see, all this denies access to justice even after the commission of the crime. These are all, and therefore, and then the past sexual history. Now, can anyone say that even a sex worker is not entitled to some dignity? I mean, even she can be subjected to rape, so how is that relevant? But that's one of the usual, you say, modes of cross-examination. So we have said that once the act is proved by the prosecution, so far the earlier sexual history is concerned is totally irrelevant. That should not be permitted at all in examination of any kind. And no consent must be an automatic presumption, and consent must be positively proved, you see, in the defense if that is taken as a defense. So these are some of the things which we have tried to say. Then, of course, something about which there's been a lot of talk, I just want to mention that too. We have said there is provision in the Armed Forces Special Powers Act for prior sanction for everything, including when the accusation is of a sexual offense. And similarly for public servants under 197 CRPC. Now, at least I fail to understand, and no one has indicated to me as yet, which is that official act of anyone of which an incident can be sexual assault. My imagination, even if it runs through it, will not be able to identify any such thing. Now, to object to this requirement that no sanction should be needed, of course, we have said something more to make it more effective. We have said there ought to be the responsibility, a command responsibility also. Someone said if a Jawan goes on holiday, on leave, to his village and commits rape. Now, who says that would be? It is only when the armed forces are in those premises which are under the exclusive control of the commander, out of bounds for civilians, and something happens, then you see, so that, it is for them to see the prevention aspect also. Now, these are some of the things which, so prevention part is something which needs to be. Now, sentencing, let me say, of course, I know Professor Menon is not for abolition of death penalty. So far I am concerned, I have a middle course. For certain offences, I personally have held the view, and at least that's my view, that it ought to be there. But I am not for adding death penalty to new offences. Now, for example, recently, the case of Kasab, or you see, at least, you can't say that death penalty in this case, because that is not an offence committed against an individual or a few persons. It is against the nation as a whole. Now, that is something, and the other risk which we saw some years back, you keep the man in captivity and then something happens, the plane is hijacked, and then you see, you have to barter, that kind of thing. But I'm not for increasing that. And let me tell you, you see, all the women's organizations and those leading women who have been agitating for this cause for decades, they were unanimous, no death penalty and no castration. Now, castration is against you see, it's a gross violation of human rights without consent. So, we haven't recommended that. And We have emphasized also on the manner in which, you see, one of the things mentioned by Professor Menon was also the rehabilitation process. How do you deal with that? So that aspect also we tried to touch. Of course, it has to be that. We've said the kind of protection, the administration is the protection homes, the rehabilitation homes, juvenile homes, etc., is such that they have become breeding grounds. In the prisons also, you see, as my friend Venkat Chalaya used to say, that very often an undergraduate enters the prison and comes out a postgraduate in crime or with a doctorate degree, so something like that. So those things have got to be taken care of. So the criminal justice system has to incorporate all these areas. And it is not merely in medicine that the well-known adage of prevention is better than medicine. It is prevention here also is much better than the cure in the form of prosecution after the, because whatever it may happen, once the sexual offense is committed, the other day the newspaper said Pandit Ravi Shankar's daughter Anushka Shankar, I mean a protected child. I mean, she says, today also I have not got over that kind of sexual abuse which I faced as a child from a person whom my parents fully trusted. Now, these are things, there's a very wide canvas. But then the redeeming feature is, even though that incident was the most unfortunate, which happened on 16 December, but then that victim would be immortalized in the sense that she has triggered this response in the civil society uniformly, particularly in the youth, who constitute majority of the population of our country. That is going to sustain it, and that's going to compel performance. Of course, a lot of debate is required, and in that respect, this conference has been certainly a great contribution in that direction. And once again, while I am here, let me tell you, I saw in these papers which were given to me a brief of, or rather a gist of the report by Professor Mrinal Satish of this university, who was one of the very active members, I mean, you see, throughout the entire exercise. I think that gives a fairly accurate picture of the entire thing and the salient features. Thank you very much. I hope this will add to some more fillip to the ongoing concern, which is a global concern. And it's not a question of personal egos, it's a question everyone must make his humble contribution to the maximum extent possible, because I'm sure there's no one alone or a few persons alone who can do this task. So everyone counts, and I think, as Gandhiji said, be the change you want to see in the world. I think each one of us should educate ourselves and continue to educate others.